Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Grind. Today I have an interview with Alicia Haque, the founder of Go Live Explore, a destination for stylish adventure. So Go Live Explore is a blog which has over 45,000 subscribers and followers across Facebook, Instagram, YouTube collectively. And if you know anything about the Vancouver influencer marketing space, you've heard of Go Live Explore and you've heard of Alicia. But today, because Alicia and I are friends and I've been able to see her career blossom over the years, have you ever wondered to yourself, what does it take to become a full-time content creator, to be paid to do what you love? Alicia is somebody who has partnered with huge brands like Google, Fairmont Hotels, TELUS. She's even shot an original video campaign with L'Oreal Professional. And if we're going to be honest, and she later will, we're going to chat about this as well. 45,000 followers is impressive, but it's not the biggest number that you've ever seen. But if you know anything about the Vancouver content creation space, especially in the travel or lifestyle niche, you have heard of Alicia Haque. You have heard of Go Live Explore. She's really well known here. I suppose that is the theme for today's episode. If you are somebody who is looking to start out in the content creation space, who wants to hopefully one day be paid, this episode will provide some insight into how you can do it without collecting subscribers. We are in an age now where brands are starting to wake up to the fact that when it comes to influencer marketing, what really matters is actual influence. It's the community around which you've developed your brand. If you are a brand that's looking to pursue influencer marketing, there is a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. Not all content creators are going to represent your brand well. So we're going to have an interesting chat. I am a professional marketer by trade, ran a marketing agency for 4 years. So there is the element of getting to the other side of Alicia's story and following her career history of taking multiple contracts to fund her passion, her blog. And then we're also going to talk about sort of the mechanics of influencer marketing, and hopefully you'll be able to leave today's interview with a bunch of insights, regardless of if you are looking to become a content creator or if you're a brand. So yeah, let's hit it. So what's really interesting is that I actually met you basically, 3 months after you moved to Vancouver?
I think even less than that, maybe 2 months.
Like 2015?
Yeah, 2015.
So it's one of the reasons why I was so excited about having you on this podcast is because I feel like I've seen up close, you develop this and grow it organically, sort of like your career as a blogger. As a full-time blogger. It didn't start out that way, but it is now. So that's what I'm excited about.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here as well.
Yeah, of course. So you moved to Vancouver from the UK in December 2014. How did you make the jump into blogging?
So I started my blog solely as a hobby. Prior to moving here, my fiance and I met. We traveled Asia for a few months. And I'd actually started 2 blogs prior to that. And I didn't tell anyone about them. One was a food blog, one was a fitness blog.
Yeah,
and
I didn't know about those blogs.
I never really showed them to anyone. I got cold feet, I got scared, and I deleted them both. And so when we decided to go traveling, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start another blog and this one's going to stick. And I just wanted to create, just a blog at the time. I didn't really have any interest in doing Instagram. I was like, I just want to, create a blog as a way to stay productive and as a way just to share my experiences with other people. And what I was finding is I was trying to find information about, where to go when we were traveling, what to pack, and I couldn't find that information. So I was like, why don't I be a resource and share my experiences, help other backpackers in my situation, and just create information that's valuable to other people and that will inspire people to travel and go to new places. And, even though that was 5.5 years ago, the inspire and the inform, those are the 2 pillars of my brand today. And that's kind of what has stayed with me. So I started my blog back then, and I was writing about travel and backpacking, and then we came straight to Vancouver from Asia, and my blog sort of pivoted in a more lifestyle direction, and it was solely a hobby, completely unpaid for about 3 years, and I just loved having sort of a side gig, and I loved having a platform where I could help people.
Right.
And then after about 3 years of doing it unpaid, I started working with brands. I started, building my audience, building my brand, and brands started to notice me. And then I started working on paid partnerships. And then about 2 years ago, I went full time. And now this is my career and my full time income.
Right.
Yeah.
There were so many elements of that story that even I didn't really know. It sounds like you sort of spotted the opportunity when you were looking for content yourself and you weren't finding the content that you were looking for.
Yeah.
Something like that in this day and age, actually in 2020, like it's kind of not as easy to conceive of, because I feel like we have content for everything now.
Yeah.
And that this content, like professional content creation space, is a lot more saturated now.
Definitely.
But in 2014, 2015, it wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
When you were working on your blog the first 3 years and it was completely unpaid, did you have any expectations for that to change? Did you know that you were going to start monetizing at some point?
No. Which is why I'm so fortunate that it's come to this, because I've been able to combine my absolute passion with a career and a job, and for me that's something I'm really proud of. But I never set out to be a content creator or an influencer. When I first started, that it wasn't really a thing. And the opportunity kind of just came about, and I'm really fortunate that it's kind of got to this point.
Right.
But it was never really my intention from the beginning for it to become this.
What were you doing to support yourself the first 3 years?
So I was doing a few other things aside from my blog. I was actually doing a lot of client work. I was editing, I was translating, I was doing a lot of writing work, and I actually had a really good roster of clients. And that supported me for the first 3 years of being here, and I was running my blog alongside of that. So all of my blog work happened at nighttime and at the weekends. There was a period I was literally working like 15, 16-hour days, my client work 9 to 5, and then 5 to 1, 2 a.m. I was doing my blog work. And it got to the point where I was like, this isn't sustainable. I was getting no sleep. It was just a lot, but that's sort of what I had to do to build the content, build my skill set, and just kind of get my stuff out there. And fortunately, it kind of got to the point where I was getting paid by brands. I was working on brand partnerships, and I thought, you know what, something's got to give. And my passion lied with my blog. And so I thought, I'm going to, take this full time and slowly reduce my roster of clients. And
so it sounds like it was a transition for you.
It was a bit of a transition. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that transition process? I would imagine in the beginning you weren't making a full-time income. So how did you slowly get to the point where...
I think I had about 4 or 5 months where I was making an income that I could live off on my blog. And it wasn't a huge amount of money. It was an amount that I could live from. And I thought, in order for me to really grow it and really put my time into it, I can't also be doing 40 hours a week doing my other client work. And it was a difficult sort of 5-6 months, because I just got burnt out in the end. I was getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. My skin got really bad. I just didn't feel good. And I realized that it just wasn't sustainable to continue working like that.
Right. So. Can you describe the moment when you realized that you could actually make a living from your blog?
There's been actually lots of moments where I've been like, really? This is what I do? This is amazing. There hasn't really been one sole moment, and it's not something I take for granted. And I know that it's a volatile industry, really, and I'm constantly trying to innovate and stand out and be somebody who it's just very aligned with my brand, and I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm happy to sort of change as the industry changes, and I take it very seriously.
Right.
And so yeah, I'm in it for the long game. It's not just a short-term thing.
So what is it like for you now being a full-time content creator? Like, what are your days like? Is there a little bit more balance in your schedule now?
Yeah, definitely. And I've really prioritized having balance. It's really difficult in the beginning when you're trying to establish yourself and you're trying to develop relationships with people and you're working all hours of the day. There isn't really many boundaries, and you get emails coming in at 10 o'clock at night and you feel like you have to answer them, and you get them at 6 in the morning and you feel like you have to answer them, and it kind of gets to a point where you're like, I need to actually set some boundaries here, because otherwise your whole life is consumed with work, and then you get burnt out, and so that's not a good thing either. And so you have to just find a balance, I guess, of and just have days where you're not doing emails. I try not to do emails on the weekend. I do normally work on the weekend, but those I like to just focus solely on work. Sometimes I'll have mornings where I just don't answer emails at all because I just want to focus on my work. And then we'll have nights where I don't look at emails at all. Matt and I will have date night, we'll do things together. And so I think it's important to find a groove with that. I love having a routine. So I will always plan out my days. On a Sunday night, I plan my whole week and figure out what I've got to do and plan my content, plan my schedule. And I find that having a routine really helps me just to kind of stay on track. Because it's difficult when you're self-employed. You don't really have anyone telling you what to do. You have to do it yourself.
Exactly.
And I mean, I love that. But sometimes it's like, oh, I wish I just had somebody just to tell me what to do.
No, I know exactly what you mean, because like even doing this now, I'm finding myself, there are periods in which I stretch myself a little bit too thin. And this whole idea of boundary setting is it's not a task or a single action. It's a process and a skill that you refine over time, and it takes trial and error.
Exactly. You have to learn from the mistakes.
Yeah. And I find that, like, when it comes to sort of giving advice to other people who might be self-employed or newly self-employed, I would almost even just say, not stress so much the importance of boundary setting, but just say, like, you deserve a little bit of grace for when you don't get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and you have to just do what works for you.
Yeah.
And what works for your body. Like, I used to be such a night owl, and I could work until 3 o'clock in the morning, and I did do that. And then my body changed. Like, I developed acne. I was just really irritable, and I was like, actually, I really need sleep. Sleep is what I needed. And then I started implementing, a cutoff point, and I would start waking up early instead. And now I start my day. I try not to look at emails as soon as I wake up, which is hard when it's on your phone.
Yeah.
But I wake up, get ready, I go for a walk, and I have my morning walk, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. I listen to a podcast or chat with a friend back home. And that, for me, that's like a good foundation for my day. And then I'm equipped to jump into work.
Right.
But everybody's day looks different. And some people like working in the morning. Some people, hate working in the morning or waking up early. I think there's no model. You have to just figure out what works for you. And it takes time. It's a process, as you said.
That being said, what would you say some of the challenges of being a content creator are?
The fact that it's kind of like the Wild West. There are no rules. And so that's a good thing because you can sort of create the rules. That's also a bad thing because you're creating the rules. And so everybody's version of what's acceptable is very different. And so I always will get messages from other creators asking for advice. What do I do? This brand, they haven't paid me for 6 months and they're not answering my emails. Or they ask me, this looks really a bit strange in the contract. What's this all about? And there is no sort of cohesion. Every single contract, every single partnership is different. And you're constantly, rooting for yourself. Right. Because unfortunately there are, clauses in contracts that could hurt you. There's clauses in contracts, and I've had this a few times where it would say, your compensation, you'll be compensated this amount, but payment is based on the performance of your post. And it's at their discretion.
Right. Because that, to me, sounds very vague.
very vague. And so what's what is satisfactory performance? What does that mean? That could
Right.
mean anything. They could say, no, it's not satisfactory enough, we're not going to pay you. And so there are clauses in contracts like that, and it's like there's just.
And you're the one to notice these clauses in contracts,
But
because
I
you
read
have
contracts, and a lot of people don't.
exactly, and also you have a degree in law.
And that, yeah.
My next question for you, and I guess we
Mhm.
can sort of like tie this in, is what advice would you have for somebody setting out today who wants to be doing what you're doing now?
So
Who doesn't have a law degree?
So a few things. I think for people who are setting out to do what I do, I think you have to do it for the right reasons. And it does look like a very glamorous job to be doing, but it's not a case of you make a few Instagram posts, you write a few blogs, and that's it. The brand partnerships come pouring in. It's something that takes a lot of time. It takes years of effort and work and building an audience and building a brand and building trust with the community around you.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time and effort. And so you can't be doing it just for the reason of making money, because that's not going to happen for a long time. So you have to do it for other motivations. So that would be my first piece of advice, is don't just do it for the money, because that's not instant. And those nights when you're working at 2 a.m. and you're writing blog posts, like, you've got to really love it in order to justify doing that. And, for people who are working with brands, you have to look out for yourself. You have to be very savvy and smart. And it's especially at the beginning, you think, oh my God, a brand wants to work with me. That's amazing. And sometimes they ask for the world. And at the beginning, it's a huge, huge deal. It's, I think my first partnership was with a brand, and they sent me a few nail varnishes, and I wrote whole blog posts on nail varnish, and it was obviously unpaid. And at the time I was like, oh wow, they're sending it to me, like, wow, this is amazing. And then obviously in retrospect, I'm like, you know what, that's not a fair exchange of work, but it's something you learn about. But you have to fight your corner.
Mm-hmm.
And really the only way you do that is just by learning, and sometimes you do get burned.
Right.
And you just want to try and minimize that, I guess.
Right. How do you get an offer for a brand sponsorship now? What does that look like? Does it begin with an email in your inbox?
Usually, yes. So there's two aspects of it. So there's either the brand or the PR company reaching out to me, or there's me reaching out to them.
Mm-hmm.
If they reach out to me, they'll it's usually by email, and they will basically say, hey, sometimes I have a relationship with them. Sometimes it's somebody new. They'll say, we love your work for X, Y, Z reasons. We've got an opportunity with X brand, and we think you'd be a great fit for it. Is this a brand that you'd be interested in? These are the deliverables we have in mind. Is this something you want to discuss further?
And usually, do they set a price for that campaign, or is it something you negotiate?
Sometimes, so if they already have my media kit with my rate, sometimes they already have an idea. Sometimes they say, what would be your price for this? Sometimes they say, we've got X amount of money, what can you do with that? It kind of just depends, really. But it's, usually they'll put the feelers out, they'll see, first and foremost, whether it's a brand that I would want to partner with.
Right.
And then we sort of take it from there.
Right. And that's a really interesting piece to me, is that this whole, now we know what influencer marketing is. A lot of brands have dedicated influencer marketing departments and teams that'll handle all of these relationships for them. Yeah. But even so, it's really not when we're talking about setting rates, it's not really standardized. It's not like when you go buy a can of Pepsi.
And it's a set price.
Yeah, it's not like that at all. Mm-hmm. And one thing that is interesting to me is that when I look at your social media stats, while they are very impressive, compared to sort of just the sea of other accounts out there, they're not it's not like you have 38 million. Yeah. But yet you're able to get these big partnerships with brands like Google, Fairmont, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to put words in your mouth.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And that's something that I think about too, is that I don't have the biggest platform, out of the sea of creators, out of everyone in this city even. Maybe I'm on this, I have less in terms of following size. It is less than other people, but I keep that in mind, and I think, well, you know what, I might not have the most number of followers, but what I do have is a very engaged community.
Yes.
And I put so much work into my content. I love photography. I'm very, very passionate about photography. And so I want my photography to be really, really high quality. I love videography, making videos, and I want that to be really high quality. So I try really to focus on the quality side of things, and creating content that just really aligns with my brand, and working on partnerships that really align. And I'm very, very picky with what I work on, and I say no to more things than I say yes to, and that's hard sometimes.
Right.
But I really pride myself in having like very strong values and just creating really good work. And I think brands do recognize that, and they want to be aligned with that, which is great.
Right.
So it's a balance, I guess.
That's what I was going to say, is that even though your following count isn't the highest, if anyone were to take a look at any given post that you have, the engagement is through the roof. And sometimes I'll just like scroll through them, and it really seems like you have a community that is built around your brand. And if there's anything that I want people to take away from this, it's like doing it the right way really does pay off.
Exactly, yeah. But that's the long route, and it takes a lot of patience. And I think sometimes brands do take the wrong approach, and a brand might say, well, if you have 0 to 10,000 followers, you have this amount of money, 10 to 20, this amount of money, etc., etc. And it's not actually about how many followers you have, because that could be inflated.
Exactly.
That's not necessarily a marker of how engaged your audience is, or how high quality your content is, or even how successful your brand is. So I think there are still brands out there who will say, you don't have 50K, we're not going to work with you. And I think that's really not the right approach to take, because it's not just about the number, it's about everything that makes that creator who they are, and their audience and everything. It's sort of a whole range of things to put into consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think brands are slowly coming around and understanding that it is about quality and not quantity?
Yes. I mean, some get it, and just some really don't. And it is quite frustrating sometimes when a brand will come back and say, I'm sorry, you don't have enough followers. And I'm like, well, you could work with somebody who has 100K, but you don't know how they've got there. And maybe they haven't got there by the most authentic method. So it's just an education at the end of the day. And sometimes I spot really shady things in contracts, and I will tell the brand, and I'll, in a constructive way, sort of teach them that actually, you can't have a compensation that isn't fixed. Or, if you want to use my content on print and on TV and on a billboard, then that would incur a separate fee. Because if you were to go to a photographer and say, we want to use your photography on a billboard, then that would be a separate rate to, we want to post it on Instagram.
Right.
And so I think it's sort of educating brands and companies that this work has value.
Yes.
And, if you want high quality, very, very professional content, then sort of the professionalism needs to come with it.
Exactly. How do you decide which brands to work with?
I have quite a strict vetting process. I'm very, very picky. I'm very proud of that, and it's sometimes it's really difficult to turn down things because it's my full-time income. But at the end of the day, I only work with a brand that I like and I would use and I would recommend to my friends, because you're a good friend of mine, and it would be awful to promote something and you went out and buy it, and then if you were like, actually, you know what, Alicia, this isn't really very good, and I would hate that, absolutely hate that. So I'm always very, very strict on who I work with. It has to be somebody who I'm proud to be associated with, and I'm proud to represent, and I'm proud to tell my audience, hey, this is an amazing product. It can work for you in XYZ way, or this is an amazing hotel to visit, because at the end of the day, people are spending their money on this stuff, and so if I'm recommending it, I want to make sure that it's really good.
Right.
And equally, I'm also associating myself with that brand, and so by working with, for example, a brand like Google, I'm also effectively turning down opportunities from their competitors.
I was just going to ask you a question about that.
Okay. What were you going to say?
No, exactly. Exactly that. Because when you pick a brand, to some extent, you're sort of closing yourself off.
You
to the
are, because you're aligning yourself with that brand, which is amazing. Right. But you're also saying to other brands, you know what, this is who I'm aligning with. And so the thing is, you never know what opportunities are around the corner. And for example, I recently went on a trip to Manitoba with Mercedes-Benz, and they put on this incredible media event on the frozen lake in a small town in Manitoba. And they made an ice track, and we basically got to test drive their vehicles on an ice track. They had bands come in, like it was an amazing, crazy, amazing event. And a couple of months prior to that, I was pitched a project by another vehicle brand. And it was quite a lucrative partnership, but it wasn't a brand that I would ever think to go out and buy. It's not somebody who I really aligned with. And I was kind of like, I could make it work, but like, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to pass on this one, and something better will come along. And it did. And had I taken that partnership, I wouldn't have been able to do the Mercedes experience, which was amazing and that far more aligned with my brand than this other one was. And so sometimes you just have to have faith that something better will come along.
And it sounds to me like, as you're answering and you're describing how you decide which brands to work with and which not to work with, it takes a certain amount of understanding of who you are, what your values are, which I get the impression that you sort of already intuitively know.
Yeah, definitely.
What those are.
Yeah. Sometimes I think maybe I'm too principled. I was saying this to Matt the other day. I'm like, am I too principled? But I don't think it's a bad thing. Right. I think it's good to know where you sit and what you want to align with and who you want to align with. I think it's really important to know that as a creator when you have a brand.
Right. I'm just sort of laughing a little bit when you said that, because this whole shiny object syndrome is something that I also kind of relate to. And in my experience, the times that I've gone for the shiny objects have always been the times that have like blown up in my face. Because if you're not doing something, if you're not partnering with someone because of shared values, that's just going to create more complications down the road. And it's not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really difficult to completely wholeheartedly get behind something if you don't believe in it.
Right.
And there were a couple of occasions when I started out and I first started getting paid by brands, and there was one partnership I worked on and I was like, oh, I don't know, but it was the first time I'd ever got paid and I was really excited and I did it. And then it turned out that they'd employed like 50 or 100 other creators in this city to post about the exact same product.
Oh.
And I remember seeing my content and then I was like, oh my God, every other person's doing this same post. And I was like, never again. My gut said no. And I did it anyway, and it backfired. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this again. And so sometimes you have to just learn from your mistakes.
You didn't believe in that brand though?
It's not that I didn't believe in it. I was just, I don't know. I think I was blinded by the fact that they wanted to pay me.
Right.
And I learned that lesson very, very quickly, that it's just not worth it.
Right.
Not when it's a brand that you just don't really stand behind.
That's true. What kind of misconceptions do you think people have about this space?
Oh, there are many. Well, it's still a relatively new industry and people are still, figuring out how it works. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that everything is free. And that's definitely not the case.
I feel like at the very least, if you're going to be doing all that work, you should be getting the product for free, or at least something.
But the thing is, it's never free. Like, if I give you something and say, I'm going to give you this, you don't have to pay for it, but you have to do X, Y, Z, and A, then it's not actually, I'm not giving it to you for free. It's actually sort of a mutual understanding. It's a partnership, right? If I give you something without obligation, then it's free, like a gift. If I give you something with an obligation attached, then it's not really free. It's just that you're using your time, your skill, your expertise as your currency, if that makes sense.
Do you think that's something that brands do kind of to their detriment? Because I'm thinking from a brand's perspective, it doesn't seem like the best policy to be handing out samples or products with the expectation that you're demanding the influencer to be on your side and give you a positive review. That just doesn't seem like good practice to me.
Not really, no. And from personal experience, if a brand, they send me a beauty product, let's say, and they say, we're going to send this over, do what you want with it, just it's yours to have, essentially. And if I use it and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, okay, I'm going to share it with my audience. My approach with that is far different to if they say to me, we've sent you this product, can't wait to see you post on it. Because then there's an immediate obligation.
Yeah.
And sometimes the products just sort of appear, and that's not complaining in any way. Sometimes it'll just come, and then you get an email saying, we've sent you this thing, can't wait to see a blog post on it. And I'm like, hang on, we didn't have a conversation.
Yeah. I wouldn't feel bad about not posting anything in that case.
No, exactly.
Especially if that's not what I opted into.
Exactly. When you haven't opted into it, you haven't agreed to it, and yet somehow there's this immediate expectation and obligation. And at the end of the day, if I'm doing an experience, and often the brands will say, there's nothing set that we need to deliver, we just want you to enjoy it and post what you want to post. I'm inevitably, if I love it, I'm going to post more than if there's an expectation. It's just sort of a principle thing, I guess. But so many brands out there really, really get it, and it's sort of equal. Some get it, some don't. So
right. Okay, so now let's talk about sort of trends that you might notice, and also how to innovate from here on out.
Right.
I would imagine that basically you're doing what you love, and you would love to continue to do it, let's say 5 years into the future. And so that means you're thinking of new ways to introduce new channels, to get yourself on platforms where your audiences might be. Can you talk a little bit about sort of channels that you're experimenting with, or channels that you're investing more in now for Go Live Explore?
So YouTube is, I think video content is so key to have. And I've sort of been dabbling with YouTube for a while, but that's definitely something that I'm really trying to power ahead more with this year, because I think video content is so important, and people love to consume video content. I'm trying TikTok, but I almost feel like I'm a bit too old for TikTok. I feel like TikTok's a whole different generation.
Right.
I don't know, but it's refreshing because it's fun and it's cool, and it's like the weirdest, most random or simple content just blows up.
Do you know if your target audience is on TikTok, or are you even thinking about them in terms of target audience? Do you think that would sort of limit you in a way?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, my audience is quite varied, really. I think there's a lot of people my age like me who are on TikTok and just watch it because we don't feel cool enough to actually do it. But I also think that having a blog, if you're a content creator, I think it's so important to have a blog, because what we've learned in the last few years is that platforms come and go like that. Snapchat was huge. I know people who had hundreds of thousands of followers on Snapchat, and literally it disappeared overnight, didn't it? When Instagram stories came along, it shut Snapchat out, and people have spent so much time building their Snapchat audiences, and then the platform essentially just disappeared overnight. And that's when you realize that all these social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, it's not really in your control. And I think having a blog is so important, because that is literally the only thing that you own.
Right.
And so if Instagram disappeared tomorrow and that is the only platform you have, then you're going to find yourself in a bit of a sticky situation.
Right.
So I think it's also important, to have your own thing, something that you own that's not going to go away overnight.
Your own real estate.
Your own real estate, exactly. Yeah, because you don't own Instagram, do you?
No. We are all at the mercy of the algorithm.
We are really at the mercy of the algorithm.
That's great. So there's a question that I wanted to ask before I forget, and I don't really know how this would fit in, so I'm just going to ask it anyway. Okay. If I was a brand and I wanted to work with influencers, what recommendations would you have for me for looking for the right influencers to work with.
Okay. So there are a few things that you want to take into consideration. The first being, if say you select a person, you want to ask yourself, is this somebody who would actually go out and buy our product or who would invest in our experience? Is this somebody who already talks about our products or our experience? Because you want to be working with people who really align with your brand. And the last thing you want is...
So if you don't already have a relationship with them, how would you know if they do align? Like, what things would you look for?
So you would look at their previous content, or, say, for example, if you're a luxury hotel and you're looking for influencers to work with, you want to work with somebody who invests in luxury themselves, or who would already stay at luxury hotels, or who just has sort of a luxury vibe around them. And you've got to think, does this person have an audience who would also go and stay at a luxury hotel? Because there's no point in, for example, working with somebody who specializes in budget travel, because if their content revolves around budget travel, then, the luxury travel probably wouldn't feed into that. And so you have to just think, whether the audience would actually be invested or interested in that product or that experience. Another thing to think about is the quality of their content and the sort of content that they would create for you. Like, often a brand, when they'll reach out to me, say as a hotel, they might ask, what other partnerships have you done that are similar, or do you have any sort of imagery, any content examples? And I have that in my media kit as well, because the brand might want to have an idea of what you might be able to create for them. And just sort of taking into consideration, who you are, what your values are, and the trust that you have in your audience. And I think, as we touched on before, it's not just about how many followers you have, because at the end of the day, the brand is investing in this creator and they want to see a return on that interest. And so you want to make sure that everything is as aligned as possible, so that you get the outcome that you want, and it's a natural partnership.
Right. I have a little bit of a following myself. I've never been a professional content creator. I don't bill myself as an influencer or anything, but sometimes I'll get, the odd email in my inbox, and sometimes it'll apply. Like, sometimes I'll go to conferences for free in exchange for certain posts, et cetera, et cetera. There have been offers that I've gotten in the past that I found peculiar. I never ended up working with or taking any of those offers. But the part that really got me was, we will be compensating you based on the performance of your posts. So it's not enough that I'm going to, put my brand on the line or announce to everybody who follows me that I am aligned with this brand, but they also want the clicks or the conversions. And I'm thinking, like, you would never say the same to, like, a magazine selling ad space. You would never demand.
Well, with a magazine, there's no measure.
Exactly.
Yes, the measure may be somebody buying that magazine, but you don't know whether they've read your ad. You have no idea.
Right. But can you really measure it on Instagram or Facebook?
I think if you're a brand and you're looking to influencers to create a set number of conversions, if you're looking to somebody to generate a set number of sales, then it's kind of the wrong approach. Because maybe your best bet for that might be targeted Facebook advertising, let's say. But if you're working with influencers, it's not necessarily about getting a certain number of clicks or conversions. The key thing with influencer marketing and working with creators is that you generate brand awareness. It's that awareness that the brand exists, and it's what the brand does, or who they are, or what this product is, or what this experience is like. It's just, allowing your audience to get to know this brand, so that the next time they're thinking about buying a mascara or going to a hotel or going on holiday, they think, oh yeah, there's that post that my friend, the girl I follow, she posted about that. Oh, maybe I'll buy that because she recommended it. And there was a study a while ago, and it's probably, the figure's probably different now, but it was something like it takes you seeing something 7 times before you actually go and buy it.
Yeah.
And now our lives are so saturated with content. It's probably even more than that.
Yes.
And that's why long-term partnerships and ambassadorships are very effective with content creators, because now I think it's almost worthless just doing a one-off post or a one-off story, because it can easily get lost in the noise. But when you work with a brand and you work with them repeatedly, you build an association, and brands associate you with that, the audience associate you with that brand, and then it's very, very effective. So it's not necessarily about the clicks and the conversions, it's about that awareness. And
exactly.
Yeah. You're essentially a spokesperson for the brand, and a very trustworthy and relatable spokesperson.
So that was really brilliantly put. And I'm going to put on my marketer's hat, because part of me is legitimately peeved by this misconception that brands have out there. And also for the influencers that take the offers, knowing that they're basically being set up to fail. Here's the thing. If you're a startup and you're on a bootstrapped budget, I wouldn't recommend you pursue influencer marketing as a way of getting genuine leads and conversions. That's just not where you should be investing your marketing capital. If you are a bigger brand, if you're ready to create general brand awareness, because if you think of it like a funnel, you can only get so many like low-hanging conversions, but once you're ready to scale, you have to really be investing your energy into creating brand awareness. And that's where the influencers come in. Those, like the influencers like you, and I know you hate referring to yourself as that, and I know you don't refer to yourself as an influencer, but I do. And it's true, like you have influence, you've got, your content
I feel like it's, no, I personally don't like saying I'm an influencer, because to be honest, everybody's an influencer. Whether you have 300 followers, 500, 5,000, whatever, everybody has influence in some way over the people around them, the people online. If you have that trust, whether it's with your friends or your family or an audience, everybody has influence in some way. But yeah, I much prefer like creator or content creator. It's just a bit less pretentious.
Okay, fine. For the purpose of this
so we can say influencer.
You're a creator. If you are a growing brand, or if you are a more mature brand, I would typically say that's when influencer marketing can be, if done right, can be really a really valuable part of your marketing strategy. So I'm going to put my marketer's hat on, and this is where I think about the funnel. You have brand awareness at the top, and then it then like trickles down into lead generation, conversions, and then even after that first purchase, then that's where the customer journey extends off into, brand loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that a lot of brands, especially the ones that are not so familiar with influencer marketing, they sort of will go in expecting that the influencer will do the selling for you. And that's not the case at all. And that shouldn't be the expectation. And it's just it's not fair to the influencer. It's going to be disappointing to the brand. And there's just more liabilities to sort of approaching it that way. Because having influencers vouch for you is not having people doing selling for you. It's the same thing as if you were to have brand loyalists loving your product so much that they would just tell a friend about it. Only if you're an influencer,
that's what it is. But you're not telling one friend; you're telling tens of thousands of friends. But if I tell you, this would really benefit your skin, you might go out and buy it, but you might not. And it might take you a week, it might take you a month, it might take you a year. And that's why things like even tracked links, I think they're great to have. But equally, if I give you a link to go buy something and you want to go buy it in 3 weeks' time, you've probably forgotten about that link, right? You might go and buy it, but you might not use the link that I gave you. And so it is difficult to track, and that is the difficulty with it. But it's a extremely effective industry. There are so many brands like Daniel Wellington, Triangle Swimwear. They boomed because they use influencers. And so
I bet you they're not measuring the success of their campaigns by conversions the way that you've just described. It is so interesting to me that despite the number of years that have gone by since conversion tracking became sort of a thing in our vocabulary, I guess, there still isn't a way to perfectly track the moment when somebody first finds out about a brand and then the moment that they make a purchase. The tools have gotten better, but really for it to be perfect would require everybody's phones and computers to be bugged.
Yeah.
Which is a different conversation. And I don't think it's necessarily something that we want.
No, you're right though. And it is really difficult to track that entire journey.
Right. And it really seems like the influencers are the ones who have to be making that case sometimes to educate brands.
Yes.
Is that something you do?
Yes. But I get pictures like you mentioned, if you get X number of app downloads or X number of sales, then we'll pay you this amount of money. So sometimes they'll say, if you create the content and then if you make sales, that's when we pay you. And it's like, well, I'm sure there are so many people who probably won't use this specific code or the specific link. I buy things that I see from creators that I really love. And a lot of the time I don't use the link because I can't find it or I forget about it or whatever. There's so many reasons. And there are also a lot of silent people out there. So I'll get messages from people saying, so I've bought, this, and this, and I just want to say it's amazing. But they didn't tell me every time they bought these things, or I didn't know, I didn't have a code, I can't track it. And I think that is the difficult thing, is that brands just have to trust the people they're working with, which is why it's so important to make sure that the people you're working with are trustworthy and that they're authentic and genuine and that they actually care about the brand, the product, what they create, but more so that they care about their audience and that there's somebody who has a very strong trust with their audience. Because at the end of the day, the reason that influencer marketing and this whole industry exists is because we have these people on the internet who have an audience that trusts them. And that is like the bread and butter of this whole industry, is that trust. And without that trust, this industry wouldn't exist. Without that trust, it's, something like a magazine or a newspaper. It's you have the trust and relatability, and that is the key.
Right.
Really.
Now I want to talk about trust.
Okay.
Within the larger context of where you think social media is now and what it's become. I remember the days in the beginning, like I remember making my first Facebook account and then making my first Instagram account and my first Twitter account. And I remember the content that I was posting back then. It really, at least the way that I was using it, it seemed like people were a lot more real back then. You didn't have to think twice about the things that you were putting out there. Now, especially on Twitter, some people are realizing that, oops, maybe I shouldn't have said those things. But in the beginning, social media really was used as a means of connecting with people authentically, which is how it ultimately proliferated so much, is because it was speaking to a core human need of connection.
Yeah.
But I've been getting some comments from people, for example, about Instagram. Some people have been saying that it doesn't seem like what it is, what it used to be anymore.
Yeah.
What's your experience been?
I actually have a very positive relationship with social media because I have experienced personally how much good it can do. I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't be sat here right now if I didn't connect with you on social media.
Right.
I met you through a friend who I connected with online, and when I got to the city, I didn't know anybody, and I have built my network of people primarily through social media. And I think it is an amazing tool for connecting people and for forming real life friendships, for online friendships. And some of the comments I receive, I'm blown away, because I got a comment earlier from a post that I posted yesterday. And it was from a girl who's thinking about moving abroad. And the post I wrote was about the sacrifices you make when you move abroad and sort of the flip side of it. And she said to me, she's like, I've been really worried about it, but your post has given me so much comfort and motivation, and I'm more motivated than ever to move. Like, thank you so much. And I get a post like that, and I'm like, you know what? This is such a powerful platform, because being able to communicate messages and help people just online, people you don't even know, they're halfway across the world. And so I think social media is very powerful in that way. And you're right, it is all about human connection, inevitably. But there are also negatives of social media, and that's what we're seeing a lot nowadays is the hate and the negativity and the bullying and the trolling. And I fortunately haven't experienced a lot of that. I do get it a bit, but not as much as some people do. And it can be a very negative space. And I saw on Twitter earlier, there's a creator I follow in the UK. She's huge, and she tweeted a screenshot of her DMs, and somebody DM'd her today saying, "Go kill yourself." And it's horrible. And that's the very, very dark side of social media, is that for whatever reason, people think that it's like their filter just goes, and they think it's acceptable to say that to somebody when they would never say that in real life.
Or that they can hide behind anonymity.
Yeah, just really just hiding behind the anonymity.
Right.
And that's sort of the negative of it. And I think you can overcome it. I think you can use social media in a very positive and powerful way, and by empowering people and spreading messages of kindness, and you can help people in so many ways.
What would you like to change? So I have something to add to that, but before that, I wanted to ask, because this is one of the questions that I think your followers submitted, right?
Okay, yeah.
What would you like to change about social media? What do you don't like about it?
So that, just the bullying aspect. And I think you realise that people are never happy. You could do the most amazing thing in the world and people will still tell you they hate it. Like, people just aren't happy with anything. And I think sometimes as a creator, or even say celebrities, let's say, you're held to a very, very, very high standard. And we see it a lot with people with huge audiences, whether they're creators, celebrities, comedians, and they've said something in a tweet 8 years ago, and now it's being brought up and they're sort of being held to a very, very high standard. And you have to realize that everyone's human, and a lot changes in that time. People change so much, and it's for things like that, people are just getting, what's the term? Where you get, it's like cancel culture, isn't it? People will just decide just to cancel someone, and they'll get trolled, and everybody will just decide to boycott them, and that's it. You're cancelled. And I don't know.
I just have so many things to say about that, but we're nearing the end of this interview, because I know you don't have forever. And
we could talk all day.
Yeah, my camera guys don't have forever. Hi, oops, sorry. I really like the saying that I heard at one point, that social media, we like to think that it changes us. We like to frame it as good or bad based on the things that we might see on social media. But I think social media is better seen as an extension of who we are as human beings. Yeah. And, just like how certain actions that we take can be good and sort of social and collaborative, certain actions that we take can also be the opposite of that. There will be mean people, there will be nicer people, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And so there's no really changing social media, because I feel like it's already gotten to the point where it's bigger than us. But rather what we can work on are the conversations that we have about social media and creating an education around it, especially with regards to our youth.
It's tough. I think especially being a young person online. I've worked on a lot of campaigns with TELUS around cyberbullying, and they're huge advocates for helping to put a stop to bullying online. And it's really scary. And I think it is important to give young people the tools that they need to navigate social media, and also just use it in the right way. And I think everybody could do with being mindful about the reason that they're using it. If you're using social media to get validation or to prove something or whatever, I think if you're using it for that reason, then maybe it's not the best reason. If you're using it to actually genuinely connect with people, that's the reason that it's made as a social form of media, right? And it can be used in a really, really positive way. but everyone uses it differently, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Yes. That is the theme of all of this, is just nuance.
Exactly. Yeah.
Last question.
Okay.
So if you could give one piece of advice to the Alicia of 2014, the one who is on the verge of making a huge move, basically to the other side of the world, with all of that uncertainty before her, what would you tell her?
Just have faith in yourself that it's going to work out, and just trust yourself, and also not to care so much about what other people think. Back then I really cared a lot about being judged by other people, hence why I started 2 blogs and deleted them without showing anyone, because I was just so scared that people would judge me or say mean things. But then I realized, why am I stopping myself from doing something that I really, really want to do because of an invisible potential fear of judgment? Mm-hmm. And I would say to myself, don't not do things that you want to do because you're scared about what other people will think or what they might say. Because, as I mentioned, people are never happy. I'm sure there are lots of people who don't like what I do or silently judge it. But the number of people that actually say that is very, very minimal. And so, the result of me doing this is I can help a lot of people. And that's for me, I think that's my purpose, and that's why I do what I do. And so, don't stop yourself from doing things because you're scared.
Imagine if you had stopped yourself from starting this blog.
I know. Or sometimes I think, imagine if I hadn't deleted those other 2, then where would I be now?
Right.
So you can't be scared. You just got to go and do it, and you've got to do it for you and for you only.
Exactly. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for being on this podcast. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. So yay. Okay. So for everybody back home, if you want to follow Alicia, I'm going to provide all of the links in the description box below if you're watching this on YouTube. And I'm sure there'll be information on the podcast format as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.